Welcome to Week 11 of the President's Athletic Conference Football Focus. I'm Waynesburg University senior Andy Stanko, and this week our focus shifts to the Case Western Reserve Spartans, who are looking to complete an undefeated regular season. Each week, the PAC Football Focus features one team from around the conference. We'll take a look into the program and highlight Saturday's matchups to get you ready for the weekend with the PAC Pregame Show following the Football Focus. Two other Waynesburg University students and I will break down every matchup involving PAC teams in Week 11. Coach Greg Debeljak is in his 13th season as the head coach of Case Western Reserve University. During his time at Case Western Reserve, the Spartans completed 3 undefeated seasons from 2007 through 2009. This group looks to join those teams with a win on Saturday, and Coach Debeljak praised his team for its resiliency and battling through injury and adversity this season.
After last year's, season, we knew we had a special group coming back. A lot of juniors were starters, a lot of sophomores were starters last year. Lost a really good senior group, but we thought we could be pretty good. What sets them apart from the others is the adversity through injuries that we've had to deal with. And everyone has to deal with them, but I think to the extent that we had them this year and to still keep rolling the way we did, was really satisfying and kind of sets this group apart from others that I've coached. Certainly the talent is there, but you never know about the depth when injuries occur, and the guys that had to step up have done so. And that I didn't expect. I thought if we were injured in some key spaces that we would have difficulty performing well, and sure enough, those injuries occurred, and coaches did a great job and the players did a great job of not letting it derail our season.
It's been injuries on both sides of the ball that have thrust backups into prominent roles where they've played outstanding football in 2016. Injuries on the offensive side of the ball turned Case Western into a more run-oriented team, and defensively, young players and backups have shined when given the opportunity.
At safety, Dan Fabiniak is a kid that's a junior. He's been with us, one of those hardworking kids that you hope you'll be able to, play on special teams and get him involved. And after week 2, he's our starter for the last 8 games. And Dan has performed very admirably back at safety. Crossy, the freshman, that was just the PAC freshman of the week this last week. We knew he was a good player, but, thought, again, maybe in nickel situations he'd be in and special teams. And after week 2, he's our guy, and they've been our starting safety for 8 weeks, and they've done an outstanding job. And the D-line was a real question mark going in, and we found out early that, boy, it's not a question mark. We have some talent there. We started 2 freshmen, Cameron Brown and Andrew Lease, along with Tyler Doty, and after week 4, both Andrew and Tyler Doty were out for the year. So kind of moved some guys, some positions, put some outside backers at defensive end, and changed schemes up a little bit and how we attacked people, and we've still been effective. So, and then on offense, 2 of our top 3 receivers were out for the year with preseason injuries in camp. Zach Medved and Luke DeFrancisco. Both Zach was a 3-year starter as a senior and a captain, and Luke started right away as a freshman. So when those guys went down, we were concerned and kind of shifted gears and became more of a run-oriented team. We thought we were going to be definitely more of a pass-oriented team, and it's worked out well. Some running backs have stepped up. Jacob Burke, our main carrier, stepped up, and he's really a fullback and has taken over the duties as a one-back running back. And he's really good. Not that we didn't think he could do it, but boy, this level with the long runs that he's broken loose this year, we just didn't see that coming. And of course, offensively, Rob Kuda, our quarterback, it all starts with him. He makes everybody around him better. I think he's the best, one of the best. I don't know if I can say he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but as a football player, everything that he does, he's up there with anybody I think that you can think of.
Since taking over as Case Western's starting quarterback in the 2015 season, Rob Kuda is 16-3 as a starter for the Spartans, and the only way to beat Case Western in the last 2 seasons has been scoring at least 31 points against this high-powered offense. Coach Debeljak says the offensive success can be traced back to its quarterback.
I think starts with Rob. And what are you going to take away? Are you going to take away the run because he's a very effective runner? Are you going to put more guys in the box and more guys to account for him? Then he's going to throw. He's going to hurt you throwing the ball. If you spread out and defend the pass, then we have Rob and a slew of backs that have been really effective. So I think it all starts with him and is carried forward by our offensive line. That is definitely a position of strength coming into the season. We have three-year starters that are juniors that are back. Gage Blair is our center, and he's our best lineman. He's been the best lineman for us since he's been a freshman. 3-year starter as a junior. And those guys are adept at inside running, pass blocking. They have our schemes down, a lot of experience, a lot of depth. Ryan DeMarinis, our left guard, went down in the middle of the year, missed 3 or 4 games. And we had a guy that Nate Lewis that started 8 games for us last year come in, and we didn't miss a beat. So I think it's just balance. But again, I think it all starts with Kuda. And, I guess I'd be hard pressed to not support him for player of the year. And I know his stats passing aren't what they were, but we're not throwing as much. And we don't have the big play receivers that we had last year that made his job easier. So in many ways, I'm looking at him. I think he's, again, a football player. I think he's done a better job this year than last year because he doesn't have as many skilled guys that are explosive players. And we just changed gears, and he's rolled with it and still are very, very effective and scoring points and moving the ball more effective than last year.
Case Western Reserve faced its biggest test to date last week at Westminster College. The Titans led the Spartans 15-0 at the half and 22-3 in the third quarter. However, Case Western Reserve responded by scoring the final 23 points of the game to keep their chance at a share of the conference championship alive. Coach Debeljak points to the culture of the program for keeping level heads and picking each other up.
You never know until you're challenged like that. But I think our culture is so good. Our leadership is very good. And when these things happened in the first half against Westminster, who is a very good football team, well coached. They did a great job of giving us problems on both sides of the ball. But no one panicked, from the players to the coaches. No one panicked. We went in the locker room. We figured some things out. And basically decided that, hey, we're not going to change who we are because we're down 15 points, and attack them the same way we've attacked teams all year. And we just started making some plays and, creating some turnovers. That I guess is what I'm proud of. Is I think that has been in place by the off-season workouts, leadership development. We spent a lot of time in that, team building, tons of team building during preseason camp. Just for that purpose, that when things went not the way we wanted to, guys were there for each other. So that is what I'm most proud of, that we responded the way we did. And I think it was from more of a cultural leadership than anything that we did X's and O's at halftime.
Case Western Reserve has owned the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball all season long. They've had one of the top rushing attacks and run defenses in the PAC.
Well, I think it all defensively, it stems from mentality that Coach Miller really puts forth the first day of camp and the first day that we prepare for a team. The first goal is to stop the run. So that's what we're going to try and do, stop the run by scheme or by mentality, that we're going to force the teams to be one-dimensional if possible. Offensively, I think it's just recruiting depth and playing these guys young. I mean, we played 3 offensive linemen, started as freshmen, and we took our lumps that year in 2014. We really did. And I think the dividends are paying off right now because we have an experienced line that can run block and pass block, knows our schemes very well. And I agree with you. I think it all starts up front, and having Rob helps. Having to defend a dual threat quarterback makes our line's job a little easier. We don't see as many crazy fronts and stunts that other teams might. But boy, you got to have those guys up front, and we do have them on both sides of the ball. They've done an outstanding job.
In 2015, Case Western Reserve started the season 7-1 and lost in the final 2 weeks of the year. Carnegie Mellon beat Case Western 52-42, in the season finale between old UAA rivals. The Tartans put up over 600 yards of total offense, and Coach Debeljak knows his team hasn't forgotten about last year's game.
Well, we certainly remember it. They did a great job last year, and I took text messages today from a number of alumni that played in that game that are pumped up. You know, that they're still hurting from that game. Little different situation, you know, losing to Thomas More last year. It was difficult getting up for that game. And again, not to take anything away from what Mellon did, because they thoroughly, you know, pounded us on their offensive side of the ball. But it was a tough week to get a team prepared for. This is not a tough week to get guys mentally and emotionally prepared for this game. This is where we want to be. And I think as a coach and as a staff, we want to make sure that we just go about this the same way that we have for the first 9 weeks. And with this group, it's about having confidence and having fun. This group enjoys being around each other, enjoys playing. Sometimes they play too much in practice. You know, you got to get them focused because they enjoy having fun. So it's been kind of a theme of my pregame talks is like, let's go out and have fun, you know, because that's the kind of group you guys are. So playing tight, these guys, it won't be good if we're playing tight. So we're going to go out and prepare and realize that we're playing a really good football team. Mellon is, boy, their losses, 2 overtime losses and a 4-point loss at Thomas More. They are really good, and we realize that, and we know that we're going to have to play really well to beat them. But you know, it is a big game, but hey, it's still just a game. And we're going to go out and have fun and play our game. And if it's good enough to win, that's great. If it's not, you know, I'm not going to let it take away from what these guys have accomplished. But yeah, there's a lot on the line. There's no doubt about that.
Coach Debeljak is one of 3 PAC coaches that come from John Carroll University, where he was a player and assistant coach before becoming the head man at Case Western Reserve. He played and coached with St. Vincent head coach Ron Dulciato and coached under Thomas More's Regis Scaife. From JCU to the PAC, the trio has had a good time.
Fun, I guess is the word. You know, I really, you know, me and Ronnie kind of grew up coaching at John Carroll, you know, under Regis. Regis was our D coordinator, and he was really the guy that showed a couple of young coaches what it meant to be a college football coach, you know, how you go about things professionally, you know, regardless of X's and O's. You know, me and Ronnie are both offensive guys, but, you know, we had a great role model in Regis Scaife to learn how to coach football and how to, you know, be professional and how to work with young men. Regis was awesome. And Ronnie, you know, we both worked on the same side of the ball and, you know, for many years and, you know, game plan together and, you know, learn from the same people. And it's been great having a relationship with those guys, you know, that we can see each other a little more often now. So just, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And as I have, you know, all the coaches in the league, it's fun going up against them. They're a nice group of people, great group of coaches. And, you know, specifically Ronnie and Regis, just really enjoy the opportunity to compete against them and, you know, continue our friendship.
Thanks to Greg Debeljak and Case Western Reserve University for being featured on the PAC Football Focus. This is the final week of the season. Thank you all at home for tuning in all season long. Stay tuned for the PAC Pregame Show coming up next on pacathletics.org.
I'm Joe Anderko, Commissioner of the President's Athletic Conference. Want to know what makes the PAC so special? Here's a few reasons why.
Comprised of 10 private institutions and 2 affiliate members, the PAC remains unique in this era of high-pressure college athletics. Now sponsoring 21 sports as it celebrates over 60 years of competition, the PAC is regarded as one of the elite NCAA Division III conferences in the nation. Our student athletes excel in athletics as well as the classroom, with numerous postgraduate scholarship winners, over 150 academic All-Americans, and over 900 academic honorable recipients with a 3.6 GPA or higher in the past year alone. Want to learn more? Visit us at www.pacathletics.org or follow the President's Athletic Conference on social media.
Academic and athletic excellence since 1955, the President's Athletic Conference.
Welcome to the pregame show here on PACathletics.org. Andy Stanko with you, and for the final week of the season, I'm joined by Donny Chedrick and Brendan Keany. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Before we get into what is rivalry week in the President's Athletic Conference and all that entails, let's take a look back at last week. What really jumped out to you, gentlemen, in terms of the results? Winners: Bethany, CMU, Case Western, W&J, St. Vincent, Thomas More, a full slate of games. What caught your eye?
What really stuck out to me was the game that was played in New Wilmington, Pennsylvania, between the Westminster Titans and the Case Western Spartans. What a game that was. Westminster leading at the half, but Case Western came back. They fought, and a crazy last couple of minutes in that game, and Case Western was to preserve their undefeated record. So congratulations to them. That was one of the games that caught my eye. And then Thomas More, talk about finishing with a bang. Big win over Teal, 63-16, and that was a home game for Teal. So what a performance by the Saints, essentially this entire season aside from week one. And they really, once again, they just have a great program over there year after year, one of the top contenders in the PAC.
One that I'll look at, and I don't want to copy Brendan and go with the Westminster Case Western game, which was the best game of last week, but one that kind of stood out and one that I thought would be more of a blowout is W&J against Geneva. And Geneva traveled to Washington and made that a close game. They lost 17-7. W&J did go up 10-0, took that into the half. But Geneva had it at 10-7. W&J scores in the second half of that game to end the scoring and go up by 10. And that's where the game would finish. But Geneva, a team that's played a couple teams pretty tough this year. I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit, but that's one. W&J had a couple close calls now the past few weeks, so not sure what's going on there. I mean, they're finding a way to win games, but Geneva giving that team a close call last week, that's something that stood out to me.
Well, Geneva also challenged Case Western earlier in the year, that a 16-14 game. I want to look at the game that occurred in Chicago this past Saturday. CMU trailed the Maroons of Chicago 24-14 going into the fourth quarter. Furious comeback, 3 touchdowns in the first 6 minutes of that fourth quarter to come back and preserve what is now a 4-game winning streak for the Tartans. They started 2-3. They're now 6-3 on the season. So CMU, a team that last year knocked off Case Western Reserve, obviously will be the featured game this week in a game with huge implications for postseason bids for both Case Western and CMU. CMU also looking for an ECAC bowl game. But with that, let's move into our matchups. We'll go game by game. Let's begin in Bethany, West Virginia. It's St. Vincent traveling to Bethany. The Bearcats 5-4, 3-4 in conference play. Bethany 2-7, 1-6 in PAC play. It's the third time that St. Vincent and Bethany are meeting in the final week of the season during Coach Dolciato's tenure at St. Vincent, and they've been close games. The Bearcats won 41-35 in 2014. Last season, a 35-27 win for the Bison. Last year, the final game, Eric Blinn, 3 touchdowns on 10 catches for 128 yards. Jalen Holmes, the game-winning touchdown with 1:37 to play from 4 yards out. This is a game that Bethany scored 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns in to overcome a 27-14 deficit in the fourth quarter against the Bearcats. And for St. Vincent, Tyler Donahue was the leading passer and rusher for the Bearcats. So a much different look this season. St. Vincent with a win would have the best season since 2011, and that will match the highest win total since the Bearcats brought football back to the PAC. So, gentlemen, I'll open it up to you, St. Vincent and Bethany.
Yeah, I mean, both of these teams needed a win in the worst way last weekend, and they both got them. St. Vincent had a 4-game stretch where they played probably the 4 best teams in the President's Athletic Conference. Bethany had only won in week 1, lost every game up until this past week when they defeated Grove City. And some numbers I'm going to point out. Jalen Holmes had a pretty solid day, 23 carries for 102 yards on the ground. But biggest game of the day, Chase Keenman, what a job he did. 19 of 25 for 308 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then on the ground, also contributing in the run game, 11 carries for 86 yards. So a phenomenal day, and that gives us a little glimpse into what the future could hold for the Bethany Bison with Chase Keenman under center. And I think that's a phenomenal job. As for St. Vincent, I mentioned it a little bit, but they were looking to play a Waynesburg team that is not to the caliber of the 4 teams they just played, and it showed. Derek Stewart had another efficient day, 18 of 30, 284 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's been a solid presence at the quarterback position for them this year, something that they've kind of lacked in the past, a guy who can hold on to the football and really make plays down the field. And one thing that really stands out to me has been the emergence of these St. Vincent playmakers. We've always known that they've had playmakers, but I think what I'm looking at is the consistency of their playmakers on a game-to-game basis this season. Damon Black, 8 receptions, 111 yards and a touchdown. DJ Ocean Kelly had a phenomenal game, 7 receptions, 148 yards and a touchdown. Derek Stewart, with him at quarterback, has been able to spread the ball around to some really dynamic offensive options for the Bearcats, and they really exploited Waynesburg's defense pretty much all afternoon.
Well, St. Vincent, you mentioned it, Andy. This is a team that, after starting out the season 4-0, it looked very bright for the Bearcats, but that October was really a murderer's row of a schedule that they faced. So now this team, with a win against Bethany, can go to 6-4, or with a loss, the team will fall back to 500. But this team will really be focused on getting the win. They did so last week, took care of business against Waynesburg, winning 30-12. Brendan talked about these playmakers. Derek Stewart, he has averaged the most passing yards per game out of any quarterback in the PAC this season, with over 289 yards a game. He has over 2,600 yards in the season, 25 touchdowns to only 9 interceptions, and 4 wide receivers that have over 300 yards this season. Damon Black, 732 yards and 8 touchdowns. Ocean Kelly, 726 yards and 8 touchdowns. Then you get Dalton Dietrich with 490 yards. He has 6 touchdowns. And then even Ryan Crawford, who has 30 catches for 307 and 2 touchdowns. So St. Vincent has had a very powerful offense. The defense hasn't always been there. Defense played tough last week against Waynesburg. So if Chase Keeneman struggles against the Bearcat defense, St. Vincent can really cruise to a victory here. But Bethany, Keeneman with 772 yards in the season with 17 touchdowns. He can sling the ball a little bit, but then defensively, what Bethany has to look to, they might have the best defensive player in the PAC, Donovan Hayden.
Sure.
126 total tackles this year, averaging out to 14 tackles per game. He has 4 sacks.
That's pretty solid.
15 and a half tackles for loss, and 4 forced fumbles. So he's a guy that's been a playmaker on the defensive side of things. If he can cause havoc, force turnovers, Bethany can be in this game.
Bethany, a big win last week, Brendan, as you mentioned, snapping the second longest losing streak in the PAC going into the matchup with Grove City. Chase Keeneman, we talked about this last week about how he's had some monster games. He's had 3 games with at least 200 yards that he's passed for, and he's thrown for 3 touchdowns at least in all of those games. Add another one with 394 yards of total offense. But then you have the other 5 games where he throws for 604 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. So we've seen very good Chase Keeneman, and then Chase Keeneman that looks like a first-year starter. I'm really interested to see how Coach Garvey in this offense utilizes their tight ends in this matchup, because Dustin Hess, 2 touchdowns for Bethany from that tight end position against Grove City. Aronis Espinal, a 34-yard touchdown from the tight end spot as well. That's something you don't necessarily see in the PAC or here in Division III football is the utilization of a tight end. You'll see it with some H-backs. You'll see W&J utilize a tight end. But Bethany, 3 catches down near the red zone, 4 touchdowns. That's certainly something to look out for. And this Bison defense, what can you say? 3 more takeaways, an interception, a pair of fumbles, held Grove City to 269 total yards of offense. And Bethany really helped the defense out by staying on the field for 36 minutes and 45 seconds. That's a huge advantage. However, for Coach Garvey's squad, 13 penalties for 128 yards against a St. Vincent team that's going to make you pay if you're going to give them extra opportunities. What I saw for St. Vincent against Waynesburg, a pass to Black of 45 yards, a pass to Ocean Kelly of 53 yards. You got those big chunk plays out of Derek Stewart in this passing game to Damon Black and DJ Ocean Kelly. And then down in the red zone, Shavonte Kraft able to run in for 2 touchdowns. So for the Bearcats, I'll say this. When I first came to the PAC, St. Vincent was that team, like Grove City is now, where they haven't won a game when we came here in 2013 since 2011, and some guys that were instrumental in the momentum that St. Vincent has been able to put together. A 500 season in conference play was thrilling a couple years ago. And so for those seniors, Ryan Crawford, Ocean Kelly, Shavante Kraft, Matt McCarthy, Matt Jenkins, to name a few. I know I'm leaving out some guys on both lines because I haven't seen them live this year, but it's been a really fun turnaround for Coach Dolciato and company. They've got an explosive offense this year with the leading passer in the conference. Damon Black, a top 6 receiver in terms of receiving yards, receptions, touchdowns. Ocean Kelly with 8 touchdowns as well. So we'll see if St. Vincent's able to move the ball. And for Bethany, this is it for Jalen Holmes, Donovan Hayden, Tyler Ambush, Aaron Fry. Tyler Ambush, a guy, 10 catches, 192 yards, a pair of touchdowns last week. He's been fun to watch. And really, with the graduation of Eric Blinn, this Bethany team has had to figure some things out, and he's been a guy who's been getting it done. For the Bison, this isn't how they wanted their year to go. They were picked 6th in the PAC poll after finishing 5-5 last season. We always talk about St. Vincent's brutal schedule, but listen to this. Bethany, Westminster, at CMU, Case, at W&J, at Thomas More. Just as bad. It's a tough schedule. The PAC is a difficult conference, and when you're not one of those top teams, it feels like you have to play all of those top teams. However, they were competitive with W&J. They bring the best turnover margin in the PAC at plus 13. Hopefully, we have another fun one down in Bethany, West Virginia, where the SVC defense gives up a bunch of yards and points. But Derek Stewart's had 2 great games. He's over 600 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions against Waynesburg and W&J. So, St. Vincent, Bethany, 1 o'clock kick. We're looking forward to closing the season for both of those teams. Next up, we have Westminster traveling to Geneva. Geneva happy to be back home. The Golden Tornadoes finished the season 0-5 on the road. They've lost their 9 straight games away from Reeves Field. However, they're 3-1 at home this year. They've got a Westminster team that's lost now a couple of games, 6-3 on the season, 4-3 in PAC play. 2 losses coming right after beating W&J, and then Geneva 3-6, 2-4 after playing a competitive game with W&J. This series dates back to the 19th century. 1891, the first meeting between these two teams. Geneva leads the all-time series, 66 wins, 44 wins for Westminster, and 8 ties between the Titans and Golden Tornadoes. And to take a look at last season, Westminster blanked Geneva 32-0 after the teams battled through a scoreless first quarter. And I do think this is funny. It was the last game before the triple option era. Aaron Channing threw the ball 52 times. Completed only 20 of those passes, 214 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And really, that was the game that Coach DeMarco said, enough is enough. Well, after that game, he made the switch over to the triple option. And I think it's gone relatively well. They've been in a lot of football games. So, guys, Westminster, Geneva, what do you think?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Geneva can always stay in a game with the triple option, especially because they hold on to the ball a lot and they really use the strength of their defense, which is their linebackers, to really do well in the run game. They prevent the run game extremely well, and they're just a solid defense overall. And that's why they've been able to keep a lot of these games with some of the top teams in the conference extremely close. Only 2-point loss to Case Western earlier this season, a 10-point loss at W&J, which is even more impressive if it were at home. You hit the nail right on the head. The triple option has looked fairly good for them, and one of the reasons why is Trayvon Marshall. He had another sensational game against W&J this past Saturday. 21 carries, 116 yards. He averaged 5.5 yards per carry. So this Geneva triple option is working well. They have a lot of the pieces to make it a successful offensive system in Beaver Falls. As for Case, here's the matchup is going to be, how does this triple option system go up against a very solid run defense that we see out of Westminster? And to give you guys a little bit of insight into this, Jacob Burke, who has been on a tear, one of the best running backs in the entire conference, was held to only 78 yards against this Westminster defense and 1 touchdown. So still a solid day for Burke. He averaged over 4.5 yards a carry, but Westminster was really the first team to be able to contain Burke to make him less of a factor. And they even contained Rob Kuda as well, who had 18 carries for only 33 yards. So he wasn't much of a factor in the running game either. Westminster really played Case Western well. If Geneva wants any chance of winning this game, they're going to have to get the running game going, which is about all they do. So if Westminster locks in on the running game early, it could be a long day for Geneva, but at the same time, Geneva has the ability to keep that game close.
You mentioned how great the triple option has been for the Golden Tornadoes this year. Third best rushing attack in the President's Athletic Conference, over 234 yards per game. But really the one downfall, the amount of fumbles that Geneva has had this season.
Yep.
17 fumbles lost. We saw against Waynesburg losing
And that's not
4 fumbles in the
necessarily
game.
fumbles that are forced by a defense. It's just executing the offense. Well, that was the case against Waynesburg.
Yeah. And going to that, looking at those fumbles and seeing that this team has lost half of the games that they've played this year by 7 points or fewer. You look at St. Vincent. That was a turnover-ridden game. St. Vincent beats Geneva 28-21. Multiple turnovers against Waynesburg. The Yellow Jackets win 10-9. Tough game against Westminster. Case Western. You have to be nearly perfect to win a game like that. They lose 16-14. But Geneva has had a solid offense this season by not passing the ball. I mean, it's really old style. Trayvon Marshall, as Brendan said, has been one of the bright spots of this team, one of the best running backs in the PAC, 923 yards, 6 touchdowns. But Javid Ellis can run the ball. Devin Koloski can run the ball. Each of those guys have 3 and 4 touchdowns apiece. And then you look at the Westminster team, really the superstars that they had last year, still good, but not putting up the numbers that they put up in 2015. This year, Colombo with 1,351 yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He also has 445 yards on the ground. McKinley, not quite to 1,000 yards yet. He has 813 and 7 touchdowns. Demetrius Bentley held in check to what he was last season, a big-time playmaker. He still makes plays, but 29 receptions, 333 yards, and just 3 touchdowns. And then Paulinelli also adds 2 touchdowns to that offense. Really, the key, though, here is that Westminster defense, and it's allowing the fewest amount of yards in the PAC, just over 300 yards per game. So that's really the story, because if Geneva can't run the ball, there's nothing Geneva can do.
I have a feeling this matchup's going to be low scoring, considering the identity of both of these teams, considering the fact that Westminster did not have Paul Colombo against Case Western Reserve. It was Joseph Salmon, 8 for 20, 62 yards, a pair of interceptions in at quarterback, and that he was a different quarterback than Evan Redding, who came in for Colombo when he got hurt against CMU. So we'll see if Westminster can figure that out. I know they missed Colombo last year with an injury as well, but this team, I think, will see quite a few guys that will end up on your all-PAC teams defensively, quite a few guys who will potentially be first or second teamers on that team. Geneva naturally plays the lowest scoring style of game, 16 points for, 19 points against. And we'll see how Westminster fails against the triple option. When I was talking to Coach Benzel earlier this season, he mentioned that when he was on staff, it was either RMU or St. Francis. They had to go down to Georgia Southern and play against that triple option attack. So his staff has an idea of what's going on and how they want to prepare for that. I also would say a couple of fun storylines for final stats. Westminster might jump Case to be the number 1 pass defense if they hold Geneva to their season average, which is under 100 yards. And then for Geneva, this is the last chance for the Golden Tornadoes to throw a touchdown this season. They are the only team in the PAC with no touchdown passes. And as a team, 28 for 72, 379 yards, 4 interceptions. That's 42 yards a game passing. And Coach DeMarco said they're building on their fundamentals, and there will come a point when the pass game is there. They'll call the pass, and they've got to make the play. This is the final week of the season. This is their last chance to do it this year. I'd say it's working towards success for Geneva. They're not quite there yet. But Donnie, to your point of them being in games, last week's 17-7 loss was the only game all season that Geneva has not been within 7 points of an opponent in the second half of a game all season. They've been within 1 touchdown of every single team, even when they've lost 29-10 to CMU and they lost big time to Frostburg State in the second half. Both of those games were 17-10 at one point. However, as you mentioned, Donnie, it's just been the turnovers that have killed them. And for Westminster, the loss to Case Western Reserve, the offense, 5 turnovers, 4 coming in the second half, including that final drive of the game. in which the Titans had first and goal from the Case 3 in the final 46 seconds. Don McKinley hit in the backfield, fumbled, recovered by Case. That's your game. Despite your turnovers, despite a backup quarterback, despite Case Western being very good, Westminster had 4 chances to get into the end zone and just it didn't work out. So I would say this team, you look at 6-3, I still think this is a very, very good football team under Coach Benzel and company. And I think Geneva at home, low scoring, I think this is going to be a super competitive game. And I'm looking forward to the results there. But we'll move on. Our next matchup is probably my favorite rivalry game in all of the President's Athletic Conference. It is the Mercer County Cup, played between Teal College and Grove City College. Kickoff in Grove City at 1:30, and the Mercer County Cup has presided in Greenville, Pennsylvania, the last 2 seasons. And as a matter of fact, the last win for Grove City, win at all for the Wolverines, came in the Mercer County Cup in 2013, when Grove City defeated Teal 50-44 in overtime in what was the 100th playing of the Mercer County Cup, which means this is the 103rd playing, I believe. Last season, Teal beat Grove City 28-23 in a game that featured 10 turnovers, including a fumble recovery for a touchdown for both teams in the second half. Ryan Radke, 174 yards passing, 2 touchdowns through the air, another 71 yards on the ground, a touchdown there. However, he had 3 turnovers. Caleb Jakio for Grove City College passed for a touchdown and 233 yards, 3 interceptions as well for him. He led Grove City in rushing with 63 yards his own. So, gentlemen, the Mercer County Cup, how's it looking?
Well, for Grove City, it was a tough loss against Bethany. We really thought that Grove City had a chance to finally get that first win since November of 2013. That didn't happen. You know what? Bethany just played really well. We mentioned the stats earlier from the quarterback, Chase Keeman. He really had his way with Grove City's defense all day. And on the offensive side of the ball, Grove City really struggled to get anything going. They only totaled 76 yards of offense on the ground, and Brett LaFoon had a first-year kind of guy day. 8 of 17 with an interception, only going for 135 yards. He was sacked a couple times. It just wasn't a great offensive showing by Grove City, and then the defense couldn't handle Keeneman, and that led to Bethany cruising to a victory. For Grove City, it's going to be tough because they have a Teal team with led by Ryan Radke at the quarterback position, who loves to put up points. Now, one thing for Grove City that we can kind of talk about here is that Teal was just kind of dismantled a little bit by Thomas More. They played a very physical Thomas More team. They did not respond too well, losing 63-16 to the Saints. And of course, a ton of teams will have that problem with Thomas More, and rightfully so. They're one of the best teams in the country, not just the PAC, the entire country. But Ryan Radke didn't play that bad against Thomas More. He ran the ball for 143 yards, picked up a touchdown, made a couple of mistakes through the air with the 2 interceptions, but overall he had a pretty efficient game, 20 of 32 for 186 yards. And we kind of talked about that going into this game, is that Ryan Radke was going to have to be perfect and then probably a little more than that in order for them to have
4 turnovers.
4 turnovers, yep. And, against a team like Thomas More, who doesn't always, but has the ability to trade chances with you and go score for score with pretty much any team. That's a mistake. You can't commit turnovers against Thomas More. We've seen that here at Waynesburg. When Waynesburg was in that game against Thomas More, 1 turnover, essentially the game was over because Thomas More is that good. So as for Teal and Grove City, it's all about really how I think Ryan Radke's going to play. If Ryan Radke plays the way that he has this entire season, it's going to be very difficult for Grove City. I think they have the opportunity if Brett LaFoon plays well, which we have seen him play well in several games this season. They have a chance, but Teal's offense really likes to put up points, so Grove City has to be ready for that.
I will say this: if Grove City cannot pick up that first win in the last couple years this weekend, Grove City will most definitely, I'm guaranteeing it, Grove City will win a game next season. A very promising young nucleus of players, a freshman at quarterback, a freshman at running back, and a freshman at the number 1 receiver spot. Wesley Schools this year, 6th best runner in the PAC, 857 yards, 6 touchdowns. LaFoon has had his first-year issues, but he has thrown for 1,344 yards. He has 7 touchdowns. but the interception number's up a little bit high at 13. But then Nick Ponikvar, 49 receptions, 633 yards, 6 touchdowns. So there's 3 guys on the offense right there, all in their first year at Grove City. So very promising for these guys in the future. However, the defense of the Wolverines gives up over 44 points per game. Whenever you're going up against Ryan Radke, who quite possibly is the most exciting player in the President's Athletic Conference, 1,991 yards, 17 touchdowns, 7 picks through the air. And that's 5th best in PAC in passing. And then he's the 2nd best guy in rushing yards per game in the PAC, 978 yards, 10 touchdowns, averages out to 108 yards per game. And Radke, the first overall in the PAC in total offense. I mean, the guy is the best dual threat in the conference, and he has nearly 330 yards per game by himself. So if Grove City keeps him out of the end zone, this team has a chance to win, but we have yet to see that, giving up 44 points per game.
As much as I think Geneva and Westminster is going to be low scoring, this game I would expect to be high scoring, especially because these defenses give up more points and more yards on the PAC than anybody. Both groups give up 44 points per game. Teal allows 490 yards per game. Grove City allows 495. However, it's the Teal offense that's been good all season long. 32 points per game, over 420 yards per game. Grove City, on the other hand, puts up 17 points per game on 314 yards per game. So Teal averages 32 points. Grove City's season high is 32 points. However, I've got good news for you, Grove City. Teal's defense has allowed Waynesburg, Geneva, and Bethany, 3 of the bottom 4 scoring offenses, to score their season high against Teal. So there is some hope for you. Brett LaFoon only played the first half against Bethany, 8 for 17, 135 yards, and interception. His best game was his first game as a collegiate player, and he's looking to get back to that success. You can pass on this Teal defense. Nick Ponikvar is a name you mentioned, Donnie. I also look for Brett Pinson, a senior, to also have a very good game. Pinson, 122 yards receiving in the loss to Bethany College. But for Teal, defensively, Thomas More really just had their way with that Teal defense. The game was close through the first quarter. Teal touchdown cut the Thomas More lead to 14-10. However, Thomas More turned on the Jets to score 3 more touchdowns before the half to make it a 35-16 game. And Thomas More, 2 of their patented 20-point quarters, the second and fourth quarters, the Saints put up 21 points each on Teal. And Brendan Kuntz have a day against Teal's defense, 345 yards, 3 touchdowns passing, no interceptions. And Teal allowed Logan Winkler to take home PAC Offensive Player of the Week honors, 3 touchdowns of 72, 64, and 67 yards.
Big play guy.
Yeah. You could say that. Logan Winkler, Offensive Player of the Week once again. However, silver linings for the Teal defense. Thomas More only 1 for 9 on third down. They sacked Kuntz 5 times. And Deshaun Bracey, another touchdown catch along of 40 yards in the day. I do want to highlight Jake Elkstay. 8 tackles, 5.5 for loss, 1.5 sacks. 5.5 tackles for loss is the 3rd most all-time in the PAC for a single game. And with the game, Thomas More clinched a share of the PAC championship. Depending on what Case Western does on Saturday, by tiebreakers, it's likely the Saints to get the automatic bid. And Donnie, you mentioned Ryan Radke in the total offense numbers. He broke his own school record for total offense last week that he set back in 2014. He'll go over 3,000 yards for the season in this game. Him and Rob Cooter are going down to the wire to see who's going to finish number 1 in total offense. Radke 2nd in rushing, 5th in passing, and he needs just 97 yards to be Teal College's all-time leading rusher. But with that, we'll switch gears to another matchup that we know quite well here at Waynesburg. It's W&J, Waynesburg, the PAC backyard brawl, the I-79 rivalry. Presidents come in 7-2, 5-2 in conference play. Waynesburg flip it 2-7, 2-5 in conference play. This kickoff at John F. Wiley Stadium down in Waynesburg at 1:30 p.m. And it's the 44th meeting between the Jackets and the Presidents. W&J leads all time 39-4. Waynesburg has defeated W&J just once during Coach Rick Shepis' time at Waynesburg, and he was hired back in 2005. The Jackets beat number 11 W&J 31-28 in overtime in 2014. That spoiled a perfect season for the Presidents. However, last year, W&J extracted revenge on Waynesburg 45-23 at Cameron Stadium. And it was a close game through the first quarter. The Jackets scored on a safety and a touchdown from Doherty to Kevin Barnes. W&J took a 14-9 lead after the first 15 minutes. However, the Presidents outscored Waynesburg 17-0 in the second quarter to take a 31-9 halftime lead, and that lead never dipped below 22 points for W&J. Pete Coughlin, another day at the office last year against the Jackets, 21 for 26, 370, 4 touchdowns without a pick. He found Jesse Zubik for a 53-yard touchdown. Zubik on the day, 8 catches, 184 yards, and a score. Ryan Ruffing in his final game as the President, 147 yards rushing on 5.7 yards a carry, a touchdown against the Jacket defense. And Jake Doherty tossed 3 touchdowns, passed for 252 yards, but also 2 interceptions. Of course, he injured all the way back against CMU in Week 3. Kevin Barnes as well, 7 catches, 128 yards, 2 touchdowns. The leading rusher for Waynesburg in that game, Jared Becker. So a different face in the backfield for the Jackets. W&J really controlled that game, outgaining the Jackets 527 to 331. So guys, Jackets, Presidents, what do we see?
Well, we see a President's team that has a prolific offense, and you touched on it a little bit. Pete Coughlin to Jesse Zubik's one of the most lethal combinations at quarterback, wide receiver in the entire conference. You know, last week didn't prove much different in a win over Geneva. Pete Coughlin went 29 of 36 for 291 yards and a touchdown to go along with an interception, and he found Zubik a lot. 13 receptions, 129 yards for him. He's been one of the most dominant receivers, if not the most dominant receiver on a game-to-game basis in the entire conference. So that is a key to watch out for. The Coughlin to Zubik combination. Can Waynesburg's secondary handle that? And judging by last week against St. Vincent with the playmakers there, with Derek Stewart, DJ Ocean Kelly, these guys had a lot of success against Waynesburg's secondary, so that's something to keep an eye on for this game. You know, as for Waynesburg, you know, once again, it's been kind of inconsistent quarterback play, not always knowing who exactly the quarterback's going to be. Tyler Perrone, a couple weeks ago, had a phenomenal game against Teal. This one, he looked a little bit more pedestrian against St. Vincent, 16 of 32 for 208 yards, and he threw 2 interceptions. That's something that has been a problem for him thus far, is making sure that the offense can hold on to that football. Aaron Jenkins, when he comes in, he is electric with his legs. You know, 12 carries, 64 yards against St. Vincent last week, but on the passing side of things, he only went 5 of 11. He did pick up a touchdown, and he had a 52-yard gain. But the completion percentage isn't always there. The consistency when throwing the football, isn't always there. So that's something to keep an eye on. And that's kind of what I see from these two teams. It all comes down to whether or not Waynesburg's secondary can bend, not break against the Coughlin-Zubik combination.
Waynesburg has to figure out who they want to play quarterback in this game. Brendan mentioned it. Tyler Perrone, not the greatest day for him last week. Certainly not the type of day he had against Teal a few weeks ago, where he threw for over 400. But he had 208 yards last week. And those 2 interceptions ended up being pretty killer, because following those interceptions, St. Vincent went on to either drive deep into the Waynesburg territory to basically switch field position or put points on the board. Aaron Jenkins came in. He tries to give that change of pace. He had a 20-yard run on his very first play, but after that he only had 11 carries for 44 yards as he finished with 64 on the ground. And something that concerns me, last week Derek Stewart, who has the most yards per game out of any quarterback in the President's Athletic Conference. He had 284 and 2 touchdowns against Waynesburg. They're facing Pete Coughlin this week, and Pete Coughlin might be overall the best quarterback in the PAC. Almost 2,500 yards, 31 touchdowns, 7 interceptions on the season, and to think 3 of those interceptions came against Westminster, so take that away. He has 31 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in all the other games. He also does a little bit on the ground, almost 305 touchdowns. And last week, Waynesburg faced a couple good receivers, but this week, Waynesburg is facing the best receiver in the PAC, Jesse Zubik. 79 receptions, 1,251 yards, and 16 touchdowns. So if Waynesburg proves that they can defend that quarterback-wide receiver combo that, without a doubt, is the best in the PAC, maybe we'll be surprised if the Waynesburg defense can stop Coughlin and stop Jesse Zubik. And then on the offensive side of things, Ryan Snedeker has 9.5 sacks. That is second in the PAC to Brian Corey. He has 15.5 tackles for loss. Can the offensive line give Tyler Perrone enough time? Can he get some protection? Can Aaron Jenkins get protection? These guys need time to look down the field and pass the ball. They can't just they can't run for their lives as soon as the ball gets back to them. So Snedeker is going to have to be contained for the Waynesburg offense to do anything. And, of course, that run game has to get on track.
Not to beat a dead horse here, but Coughlin to Zubik is a really, really lethal combination. And for Waynesburg in this secondary, we've had conversation with Coach Shepis, and it's been big plays the last couple of weeks. And each of the last 3 weeks leading up to this game against Thomas More, Dalen Garland had over 100 yards, a catch of at least 40 yards, and a touchdown. For Teal College, it was Deshaun Bracey, over 200 yards, a couple of touchdowns, a touchdown pass of 60 yards. Last week for St. Vincent College, 2 separate receivers, over 100 yards, and Damon Black and DJ Ocean Kelly. Each of them had a reception of at least 40 yards. So there's a theme, and there's no one better in the PAC than Jesse Zubik. And Jesse Zubik, over 1,200 yards. He's 137 yards away from becoming the PAC single-season receiving record holder, and it would pass Teal's Brandon Chambers, who had 1,388 yards in 2005. He's currently number 6 all-time in PAC history, with everyone in front of him attainable. Eric Blinn ahead of him, Goose Cohorn ahead of him, and then a couple of very talented guys from W&J in years past. So it's doable, and he's been outstanding. He burned the Jackets last year for a touchdown and 184 yards. And Donnie, you mentioned Ryan Snedeker and that defense. That defense, 91 tackles per loss, which is number 2 in the country this season. So they've been outstanding. And for Waynesburg, once again, the worst rushing offense in all of the PAC by at least 20 yards. They have not been over 108 yards in any game this season. They have not been over 3.5 yards a carry in any game this season. They've only reached 3.5 yards a carry in a single game this season, that against a Grove City defense that is at the very bottom of the PAC ranks. But we'll save the Waynesburg chat for the Waynesburg specific media, and we'll move on. Finally, we take a look at the 31st annual Academic Bowl between Carnegie Mellon University and Case Western Reserve. And this game is a doozy. Case Western Reserve 9-0, 7-0 in conference. CMU 6-3, 5-2 in conference. However, winners of their last 4 straight. They started last season 2-3 and then won a bowl game, beat Case Western in the final week of the season. So this is a game that Case Western absolutely cannot overlook. Case Western's ranked number 21 in the country. Last season, a 52-42 win for CMU over Case Western. That Case Western team started 6-0 in conference play, and for CMU it was the Tartans' 6th win in a row, and they went on to win an ECAC Bowl, or to an ECAC Bowl to beat Bridgewater State. Case Western ended the season with 2 consecutive losses, first to Thomas More and then to CMU, and they stayed home from the postseason with a 7-3 record. Last year it was up and down. Both teams had 17 possessions, but CMU won the shootout 52-42. The Tartans with 627 yards of total offense. Andrew Herron, 298 yards, 5 touchdowns through the air. Sam Benger, 237 yards on the ground. Even with CMU missing 2 field goals, the Tartans controlled time of possession 36-24, 9 for 17 on third down. They were all over Case Western Reserve. And for Case, 10-0 is on the line. Coach Debeljak has had some very good teams at Case Western Reserve. From 2007 to 2009, they had a win streak of over 30 regular season games. Right now, Case is your number 4 team in the NCAA regional rankings that were released for the second time this season. Thomas More is the team that's going to represent the PAC with the automatic bid. That's the odds-on favorite of what's going to happen, meaning Case Western's vying for one of those 6 Pool C bids. And those rankings indicate they're in line to get one if they have a 10-0 record. However, you look at that strength of schedule, 475, it's the easiest out of any of the top 8 teams in the region. So CMU, with a loss to hand Case Western a loss, 9-1, might not be enough to get in to the championship, especially considering if they haven't played W&J or Thomas More. So everything on the line in this game. Gentlemen, what do we see?
I'm so excited for this game. I pointed this game out a couple weeks ago when we saw that Case Western still had a perfect record going into Westminster last week, and we were like, this is going to be 2 really good games, probably the 2 hardest teams on their schedule this season. were the last 2 weeks of the season. So good timing for Case Western. Obviously able to pull out a win, and that's what great teams do. They find a way to win even when there's some adversity, even when Westminster really beat them up pretty good in the first half and had a real chance to score in the final minutes of that game, which would have given them the lead and possibly the victory. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that Case Western, things seem to be falling in place for Case Western. But what a game. I'm very excited for this. I think I say this every single week about Carnegie Mellon. They had a real shot to be undefeated up to this point. We take a look at their first game of the season, an overtime loss, and
they were up 21-0 in that game.
Exactly. And then you take a look a couple of weeks later, and
20-16.
20-16. They lost to Thomas More, and then a triple overtime loss at W&J. So I think this team just is qualified to be in that top tier of PAC teams.
And in that W&J game, they had a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter.
In the fourth quarter, that's right. So at least in a position to be undefeated this year. So I think they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder heading into Case, obviously beating them last year. And why? It all starts with their running back position. Sam Benger returned to true form against Chicago this past weekend. What a day he had. 29 carries for 197 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaged almost 7 yards per carry. Obviously, no one informed Chicago that he is one of the best players. Got to key on him a little bit. But a tremendous job yet again for Sam Benger. I feel like we say that almost every single week, considering a bad day for him is like 130 yards and a touchdown. As for Alex Klein, the passing game wasn't as good as it needed to be. Carnegie Mellon did need to come from behind in that game, really dominate the fourth quarter, 23 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. He went 10-23 for 141 yards, was able to hold on to the football, no interceptions, which is key. But once again, the defense doing what it needed to do. As for Case Western, this is a matchup, Jacob Burke versus Sam Benger, possibly the two best running backs in the entire conference going head-to-head. Finally, Jacob Burke, he's been a revelation this season for Case Western. He was slowed down a little bit by Westminster, still gained 78 yards. He averaged over 4.5 per carry, and he also had a touchdown to boot. Rob Kuda, he didn't have the best performance, not the best numbers that we've seen out of Rob Kuda. 16 of 33 for 257, 2 touchdowns. And uncharacteristic of Kuda, who rarely makes a mistake, he threw 2 interceptions, and those 2 interceptions could have certainly helped swing the game into Westminster's favor. That's something he's going to need to be careful about, especially against this Carnegie Mellon team that is on a roll. Very excited about this game, and it's really going to tell a lot about the power shift here in the PAC.
The matchup, when you look at this one, you see Sam Benger, who is the best running back in the PAC, over 1,400 yards this year, 21 touchdowns, averages out to nearly 160 yards rushing per game. But Case Western, the second best defense giving up yards this season, 308 yards allowed per game. So that's really a matchup you have to look for. If Sam Bender can run freely, Carnegie Mellon can upset Case Western on Saturday. However, if Sam Bender is held in check, that puts a lot of pressure on Alex Klein. And Klein's been all right this season, over 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. But Case Western counters with Rob Kuda, and Kuda's a guy who has over 2,000 yards passing, just under 800 yards rushing, and just about 30 total touchdowns on the year. And this is a guy, like Brendan said, doesn't turn the ball over much. So Case Western really right around the top in every major category, offensively and defensively. CMU, if Benger can run, this team has a very good shot to upend the Spartans. However, a tall task, but it will be a great game, and there's no doubt about that.
I just can't wait. Both of these teams are coming off awesome comeback wins. Chicago down CMU down 24-14 in Chicago. 3 touchdowns in the first 6 minutes of the quarter with Kyle Britton, your PAC Defensive Player of the Week, an 85-yard interception return for a touchdown. So instead of Chicago going up 31-14, instead it's 24-21. Sam Benger, a pair of touchdown runs from inside the red zone. William Richter, a big punt return to set up one of those touchdown runs. And the defense for CMU gave up 450 yards passing, The Maroons had a 120-yard rusher on the day, but in the fourth quarter, pick six, punt, 3 and out, fourth down stop, and a safety. They came through when they needed to. And you had Britton, Defensive Player of the Week. You had Stanley Bickledge, 17 tackles, 1 for loss. Aaron Watson, 12 tackles, 1.5 for loss, 3 pass breakups. The defense, 6 sacks on the day. CMU rose to the occasion, got the win. In Case Western, exact same thing. Down 22-3 in the third quarter, scored the next 23 points to win the game. Rob Kuda, a 24-yard touchdown pass to Justin Fan. Next drive, Daniel Fabiniak, someone who Coach Debeljak mentioned by name in this week's focus, an interception. Case fumbles in the Westminster red zone. The defense gets it back with a 3 and out. The offense stalls again at the start of the fourth quarter, punts away, and then you get a forced fumble by Patrick Crossy. Offense takes over on a short field. Kuda finds Lynch for a touchdown to cut it to 22-19. Westminster 3 and out. And then fourth and goal from the Westminster 1. Coach Debeljak trusts Jacob Burke, and he gets it into the end zone when they could have kicked a field goal to tie the game in the final 4 minutes. And it paid off trusting his guys. Westminster drove the length of the field. McKinley fumbled inside the 5-yard line. Case comes away with a win. And for Case Western, Coach Debeljak was really clear that the identity of this team was different because of the injuries to the offense and the receivers. And Rob Kuda doesn't have the numbers that he had a year ago, but I would say 10-0 makes him a legitimate Player of the Year candidate leading this Case Western team. 325 yards of total offense per game, 29 total touchdowns. Last year, this game was up and down, swings of momentum, 52-42, and we're really looking forward to it again this year. Thank you for joining us all season long on pacathletics.org. I'd like to thank Joe Underko, Kevin Fenstermacher, and all the SIDs and coaches across the PAC for making this possible, and for you at home for listening as well. Thank you.